All right, so good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jesse, and I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. If you're joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. Now, just yesterday, we kicked off our epic Week of Wonder, featuring stories from science centers coast to coast to coast across Canada, and we broke the internet. More specifically, we broke Danica's internet. We had a forced program planned for the end of the day, and it just didn't come together, but it's so exciting that we are able to come back today, take you guys out to lovely British Columbia in the Fraser River Valley, one of the most beautiful places in the country, to learn about how you can become a junior naturalist, and more specifically, to learn about the concept of a sit spot. So I don't want to steal our thunder. I'm so excited to dive in with today's program, and thank you to our folks joining us on YouTube. If you guys are here that were set to join in yesterday, it's so nice to have you. If you're tuning in after the fact, well, that is great too. It's so exciting to keep the Week of Wonder going at the end of day 2. Without further ado, here's Danica to take us away and dive in. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I cannot wait to hear your story.
Hi, my name is Danica Dieter-Tate. I'm the Education Programs Manager here at the Fraser River Discovery Center. As Jesse mentioned, we're located near Vancouver in British Columbia, just on the banks of the Fraser. And I'm so excited to share with you all about virtual or sit spots and practice a virtual sit spot with you today. So I'm going to go through a little bit of intro first, but just please make sure that you've got pencils and paper ready to go on either a digital or a physical copy of that nature poetry form PDF that was shared with you. So the Fraser River Discovery Center, we are located on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples. And territory acknowledgement is just one small part of reconciliation. So please take a moment, either now or later, to think about other ways that you can participate in reconciliation with Indigenous communities. The Fraser River Discovery Center is a really awesome center. If you live nearby, we'd love to have you come visit sometime, or if you're ever visiting BC, you can drop on by. In the top right picture, you can see where the building all the way at the back of the image with the sails right on top of the building. And you can see we are literally located right on the Fraser River itself, which is pretty cool. We are the voice of the Fraser River, and we present stories from all kinds of different aspects of the river and its contribution to the life, the history, and the future of British Columbia. Our vision is a living, working Fraser River with thriving people, ecosystems, and livelihoods all along the river, from the headwaters to the Salish Sea. And our mission is to bring together many diverse voices to celebrate the Fraser River. We focus on the 3 main pillars of sustainability. So those are environmental, economic, and sociocultural. And the Fraser River is hugely important for all 3 of these pillars. So the Fraser River is home to the endangered white sturgeon, and it's one of only 2 rivers that has this endangered fish. The Fraser River Delta is a vital stopover place that provides habitat and food for literally hundreds of different species of migratory birds. The Gravel Reach, which is just a pretty small section of the Fraser River, has over 30 different species of fish living in that one section, which is remarkable. And it's one of the largest salmon spawning rivers in the world. It's also a vitally important economic river. So because the Fraser River flows right out into the ocean, it is used for global imports and exports, connecting Canada with all other countries around the world. It's really important for tourism. There's lots of river rafting and sport fishing that happens. There's commercial fishing that happens along the river as well, both up at the top and near the mouth. 2 of the tributaries have hydroelectric dams, which provides green energy, and it's also vitally important for transporting all the different natural resources that BC harvests. And of course, The Fraser River is a very important sociocultural river. So it's home to immigrants from all around the world. It connects British Columbia to Canada and to the rest of the world. And it has been home to Indigenous peoples since time immemorial, with a huge diversity of cultures and languages. So let's dive into the topic at hand. Today we're going to be talking about sit spots. And a sit spot is essentially a spot where you sit. And while you're sitting at this spot, you make observations about the natural world. By returning to your sit spot repeatedly, many, many times over long periods of time, you're able to notice patterns and changes. And both of these things are really important right now, more than ever, because as we are going through lots of different changes due to climate change, being able to notice those patterns and the breaks in patterns and the changes in patterns helps keep us in tune with what kinds of changes our world is going through. This is a practice that has been utilized by naturalists all throughout history for hundreds of years. Anytime you see someone with a nature journal, that's kind of like they're doing a version of a sit spot. So today we're going to be talking about sit spots. So how do you pick your sit spot? Well, your sit spot should be close to home, and it should be really easy to get to. You may have a really awesome view from a mountaintop, but are you really going to go to that mountaintop every day? Probably not. If it's easy to get to, if it's close to home, you're going to be able to go to your sit spot very frequently. It should be filled with natural elements. Now, this doesn't mean it has to be in the middle of a forest. It could be smack dab in the middle of a city. There's nature everywhere if you know what to look for. Imagine sitting on a bus stop, on a bench at a bus stop. You probably see crows or pigeons. You may see changes in the weather. You may see different molds or mosses growing on the bus stop itself. So there's nature all over that you can look for. It should be a place where you can be alone. You may have people nearby around you, but it should be a place that you can be alone with your thoughts and your observations without lots of people interrupting you. The last two most important things are it should be safe. You should be very safe while you're there. You shouldn't feel in threat in any way, and it should be interesting. Now, what do you need to bring to your sit spot? Well, the most important thing to bring to your sit spot is a place to record your observations. This could be a notebook, a journal, a clipboard full of paper, and you'll need some pens and pencils to use with your paper. Some useful things you may want to bring with you are a plastic bag to put over the top of your notebook if you live in a wet place like I do. You may want a voice recorder if you'd rather look and not worry about writing so much and then transcribe your notes later. You could bring a camera. I know I take lots of pictures on my phone. A magnifying glass can be really helpful to get into the smaller scale of your sit spot. If you know how to use them, identification guides are really, really wonderful tool to give you the names of the different plants and animals and bugs that you're seeing. And you might also want to bring a small bag for ethically collecting little objects that you find at your sit spot. Now, if the term ethical collecting is new to you, I would encourage you to look it up after this program. We want to make sure that if you're out there collecting anything, that you're doing it in a way that leaves no harm to the space that you're in. And finally, some comfort items can be a really great way to help you stay at your sit spot even longer. So seasonally appropriate clothing, make sure that you're bundled up warm in the winter and not overly hot in the summer. Something dry to sit on, again, if you're in a wet climate like mine, can be a real boon. A garbage bag works perfectly. If you've got rain pants or a camping chair, that works as well. And seasonal drinks or snacks. I know I stay at my sit spot much longer when I've brought hot tea and some snacks for myself. Now, what should you do at your sit spot? Well, the very first thing you should do every time you go to your sit spot is write down the date, the time, and the weather. Now, these three pieces of information are so important for giving context to whatever observations you make while you're at your sit spot. It's really important because the date can tell us about what season is it. The time can tell us, are you out at early morning? Are you out in the evening, in the middle of the night? Weather impacts natural behaviors quite a lot. So when you write down this information, it means that if you go back and you look through your sit spot observations in the past, You'll be able to see what was happening at that time. What was happening in April last year? Is that any different than what was happening in April this year? It can really help you compare and contrast. Once you've written down those 3 key pieces of information, it's kind of up to you what you do. You could simply sit and make observations by looking around you. You could listen, which is what we're going to practice doing today. You can track changes, either changes to your whole sit spot or changes to an individual organism. Maybe there's a new plant growing, or maybe there's a log decomposing. You can identify species. This can be a really great way to get to know the names of the different things that live around you. You could conduct experiments. There's endless experiments you can conduct while at your sit spot. You can make art. Really, you can do anything you'd like. Just follow your interests and chase your curiosity. If you'd like some more ideas of what to do after our program today, you can go visit our YouTube channel, and we've got tons of videos which explain in depth different kinds of observational techniques you can do at your sit spot. Today, we're going to practice doing 3 different observational techniques at our sit spot. So again, make sure and the weather, those 3 very important pieces of information. And then you're going to mark an X in the center of your page. This represents you. As you're listening to sounds and marking them down on your map, there's many different ways you could mark those sounds. So I've got some examples for you here. On the left, you can see I've used different colors and different line styles to visually represent what I was hearing. In the center, you can see I've used words to describe the different sounds. And on the right, you can see I've used X's just to mark down where those sounds are. The largest X's show the loudest sounds, and the smallest X's show the quietest sounds. So we're going to be doing a sound map virtually today. Make sure to use your imagination to help imagine where those sounds would be around you. Obviously, today they're going to be coming from simply one direction, your speakers. You can use your imagination to help place those on the map where you hear them. Now, the video is going to be just 2 minutes long, so this will help us just practice this technique together. All right, I'm going to cue up. We've got our first video ready to go. Again, it's 2 minutes long. Jesse, if you can share the marsh video. All right, if we could switch back to the presentation.
Oh, the presentation was unshared. You've got to bring it back.
Oh.
It's okay.
Let's try that again.
While you're doing that, I just want to note we've got classes joining us in Belleville, in St. John, New Brunswick, in TP Creek, Alberta, Tavistock, all sorts of amazing places. Our Hamilton School District, just so many amazing people today, which is awesome. But you're good to go, and I'll bring it back up.
Awesome. So great work with your sound maps. So we're going to try a second technique now called observational sketching. So again, you'll need your pencils and paper. And before we dive into this one, I just want to give a big disclaimer. It does not matter what your sketch looks like, and it does not matter if you think you're a good or a bad artist. The point of the sketch we're about to make is to observe and to look closely at something. The act of drawing, the process of drawing, helps you look closely at something. So don't worry at all about judging your drawing as you're doing it. Just make sure you're looking closely at the object. So we're going to draw the same object 3 times. And this is a really great way to slowly ease yourself into noticing more and more details about something. The first drawing you're going to make, you're only going to have 30 seconds. So I'm going to set a timer, and I'll let you know when those 30 seconds are up. Giving yourself just 30 seconds helps you kind of focus on the general shape, the big outline, without getting too worried about the details just yet. You're going to then do a second drawing, and you're going to have 1 minute to do this one. This gives you time to see that general shape and to start looking a little bit more at the interior shapes. What are the smaller shapes inside the big one? And finally, you're going to do a third drawing for 3 minutes. Again, the same object. And this 3-minute drawing is where you're going to really dive into the details of the thing you're looking at. Are there interesting textures? Are there shadows somewhere? Are there places where the object actually is irregular? Or is there a rip or a tear or a hole somewhere? So make sure you're doing 3 separate drawings of the same thing. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So this first one, again, is 30 seconds and go.
Dun, 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 dun. Our last little few seconds, guys.
Fantastic. All right, you did your 30-second sketch. We're going to move into our minute sketch now. So this is starting to focus more on what are the shapes inside the big shape. You've got 1 minute starting now. Halfway through, just 30 more seconds. Again, making sure that you are not worried about how it looks, whether or not it's beautiful. Put all that out of your head. We're just focusing on observing and noticing things today. A minute. Fantastic, friends. We've got 1 more sketch to do. I know I said it was going to be 3 minutes, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to make it 2 minutes. But again, you're focusing on those interior shapes. You're looking at the details, looking at the shadows. I know when I draw this one, I'm going to be looking at all those interesting veins throughout the center of the leaf. So 2 minutes and go. There's a lot of fantastic patterns and textures in this leaf. You can see the big central veins. You can see lots of tiny little veins connecting them. We've got some really cool translucence happening on one of the left lobes. All kinds of textures you can notice. We're about halfway through this drawing, just a minute left. Thirty more seconds. If you feel like you're done, look again. You're probably not. There's more you can see. There's always more details you can see if you look closer. And fantastic work, friends. You did 3 amazing drawings. Nice job. So the last one we're going to do together is poetry. And poetry is one of my favorite things to do at my sit spot. It's a wonderful way to describe what you're seeing around you, but it's also a wonderful way to describe what you are feeling. And what you're feeling is just as important an observation to make as what temperature it is or what colors are the leaves under your feet. So I've provided you with a PDF which shows 3 different poetry forms on them. I'm going to go through the first 2 really quickly, which you can use while we go to our last sit spot along the Fraser. So one really easy poetry form you can do is an acrostic. You may have done these probably in primary school. Essentially, you write a word down the left side of your page. For example, in this one, I've written clouds, and then you write a word, a phrase, or a sentence that starts with each of the letters of that word. So for example, here, you can see I've written clouds, condensation in it seems to have changed it's reformatted itself. So just read along with me. It actually says condensation in fluffy shapes, lazily drifting through the blue, up, oh my goodness, through the blue, over our heads, up, 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 so high. Do you see a cat too, sleeping in the sky? Apologies for the weird formatting there. Another poetry form you can do is called a triant. Triant because, again, it's reformatted itself on me, but that would have looked like a triangle. You can still kind of see that triangle shape. And the triant poem helps you explore the 5 different senses of a topic. So for example, line 1 is the title of your poem. So the subject, so I've written this poem about moss. Line 2, you'll write 2 words that describe the smell. I've written damp, musty. Line 3 is 3 words that describe what it feels like. I wrote soft, pillowy sponge. Line 4, 4 words that describe what it looks like. I wrote delicate leaves close together. And finally, line 5 is 5 words that describe what it sounds like. So I described moss as sounding like muffled socks walking in slippers. So in a moment, I'm going to show you our final video. This was also taken along the Fraser River from Surrey Bend Park. You're going to have 3 minutes to write a poem. So you could write an acrostic, a triant. There is a 3rd poem on that PDF that you could try as well. It's a bit more complicated. Or you could write any kind of poem you want. So really think about what you're seeing, what you're hearing, and how it makes you feel. So Jesse, if we could play the peer video for, yep, here we go. about a minute longer, friends. "30 more seconds. No worries if you can't finish. We're just doing a practice together today." All right, that's it for our poetry writing. Jesse, if you wouldn't mind turning off the video. Perfect. So hopefully you had time to at least start the practice of writing a poem, get the feel of it. It's definitely something you can use while you're out at your sit spot. And I realized I need to make a quick correction. That was actually taken at the New West Key, not at Surrey Bend Regional Park, in case anyone saw the difference there. So just a couple more slides before we finish up. If I could, there we go, perfect. So we've done 3 practices together, and these are 3 wonderful things you can do while you're at your sit spot, making sound maps, practicing your observational sketching, and writing all kinds of poetry. If you get really excited about sit spots and you want some additional help with how to do them, you can go find us on YouTube. We are at the Fraser River Discovery Center, and we've got tons of videos all about sit spot techniques, which will go in depth on how to do all kinds of different practices. You can also find this really fantastic book called Keeping a Nature Journal by Charles Roth and Claire Leslie. And it's a great resource on how to structure your nature journal, what kinds of things to put in it, ideas on different materials you might want to use. And finally, please connect with us. So you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at the FRDC, or you can find us online, FraserRiverDiscoveryCenter.org. We've got all kinds of things that we do. We've got online programs for all ages. We do school field trips online and in person. We've got tons of teaching resources available on our website and so much more. So that's the main part of my chat for today. And now I think we'll move into some questions.
Fantastic, Danica. What a fun program and really unique. I must say, not only do they have the chance to play around and play with poems and drawings, but it's so peaceful. Someone mentioned this in the chat too. It's so nice to get out into nature. It's something we've been highlighting in all our programs this week. So even virtually, even through the computer, I feel very zen at the end of the day.
Wonderful.
For our folks joining on YouTube, if you guys have questions, we'd love to hear them. Please do share in the chat. I have some of my own, of course, but the more we can hear from you, the happier I am. And in fact, our first one coming from Ms. Lebrec's class. They've been joining us all week long. So many great questions from them. In your opinion, what makes the best sit spots? What season would you see the most changes at a sit spot?
Ooh, those are both fantastic questions. So, I think this is maybe a not super exciting answer, but I think what makes the best sit spot is a place where you feel excited and interested. The places that I'm going to be interested in are different than the places that someone else might be interested in. I personally love sit spots where there's lots of trees because I think there's fun behaviors you can observe with all the different things moving up and down the length of the tree. You've got birds at the top and bugs at the bottom, but someone else might find a lot to look at in a city park, for example, noticing maybe the influence that people have on the nature that they're witnessing. And the second question was, what seasons do you notice the most changes? And actually, I think going to a sit spot over a whole year, for example, if you're only able to get out every once in a while, making sure you go once a season is really going to give you that feeling of change and witnessing the huge impact that seasonal changes has on the world around us.
Yeah, Great answer. For me personally, I recently moved about 4 months ago, and my favorite sit spot is just to go right out to the lake, about 10 minutes away, see all the birds come by. There's ships out in the distance too, which is really fun. And I think that that's something that we're really trying to highlight in all these programs, is that you can find biodiversity wherever you are. If you happen to live in a nature park or a provincial or national park, great. If you're in the heart of a major city like Toronto or Montreal or Vancouver, there's so much to discover, and there's so much out there. So
Absolutely.
on that note, sorry, from a scientific perspective, is there any apps or programs you'd recommend that people could use to learn more about that wildlife that's near them, plants or animals alike?
That's a fantastic question. And one of the videos that you'll find on our YouTube channel is actually all about my favorite app that I take out with me. It's by the people who make iNaturalist, and it's called Seek. It's a free app, and it basically uses photo recognition built into your camera. It's like this incredibly sophisticated AI they've developed, which you point your camera at a plant, a bug, an animal, and it will do its very best to identify it. 9 times out of 10, it's able to tell you the species of what you're looking at, which is pretty remarkable. And if you're interested in that, you can go check out that video I mentioned, which gives you all kinds of tips and tricks on how to use it effectively.
Fantastic. I had that built into the broadcast from the get-go. I figured you might mention that. That's something I always love to highlight here. Seek is the coolest tool ever. Honestly, like I would have died to have it as a kid. You can go and find so much about the world around you, see where that animal's distributed, see other people's findings, and it gamifies it. So if you take a picture of the squirrel in my backyard, I've earned the mammal badge, and then a cardinal, and I've earned the bird badge. So it incentivizes nature learning. The coolest thing, go check that out if you learn nothing else from all our broadcasts this week and month. Everyone should get the Seek app.
I highlight that.
Lee Waterhouse, grade 3s at our HPEDSB virtual school. They want to know, how can you do a sit spot if you can only go once a week?
Fantastic question. And how often you go to a sit spot does not really impact how deep you can go at that place. If you're able to go once a week, once a month, once every few months, it's totally fine. The thing I would encourage you to do is to just really notice changes. So that's a really impactful thing you can do by going to this place repeatedly. So if you're going once a week, maybe pick a particular plant or a particular location, maybe put a flag marker in the ground at your sit spot and track changes week to week. Are there leaves growing? Are there things decomposing? Are you noticing more bugs in that one location this week versus last week? And can you relate it to any changes in the weather? Going every week is actually pretty frequent too. So going once a week is awesome, and you can do a lot of really fun experiments over time going once a week.
Yeah. Great answer. Now, I mentioned when we were playing those videos that it was really calming for me personally. And so across the world, and certainly in Canada, there's this big push for outdoor education now. Let's get kids outdoors, take those times at lunch, take that time after your school day, go explore and see what you can find. And I mean, calmness is one, exercise, the ability to get outside. For you personally, Danica, when you go to a sit spot, are there other benefits outside of this ability to interact with nature in a meaningful way? Are there other things that make it just that much a sweeter deal to have this opportunity?
Yeah, for me, I find a really huge benefit in being able to notice sort of the slower changes happening around me in the world. I spend more time inside than I'd like to. And, when you have constant lighting from overhead and you're looking at screens so often, I don't always notice how much time is passing through my life. But when I go back to my sit spot every time, I see, wow, last week there was eggs in that nest and now they've all hatched out. Or last month when I came, that was just a tiny little seedling and now look, it's got flowers. So it really helps me connect with how I'm moving through time, and I find that very cool.
Yeah, I love this whole focus on seasonality. This is something that I've started doing in my own life with regards to food recently, and I think that if you get things that are in season, if you go and explore seasons, if you sort of take that the very non-Canadian view that all seasons are good, it's not just spring and summer, fall and winter have their benefits too. I think that's really nice because it means you come to appreciate those things just that much more, and especially when it comes to wildlife and nature, that's a really special opportunity. All right, so with sit spots, I mean, this concept, this idea of going out and exploring and documenting things is a really I guess, precursor to the scientific process that naturalists that end up doing, amazing things, making big journals, doing incredible artistic documents, started with. I mean, is there an end game to this? With sit spots, are you hoping that people come to just appreciate things? Are you hoping to push people to become a scientist? Is there I don't know. What's your thought?
Well, you bring up that it's been used by people throughout time, and one of the great things about people in the past who have kept a sit spot and who have kept a record of a sit spot is that we have this incredible detailed record of how things were 100 years ago, 200 years ago. For example, there's tons of naturalists throughout North American history, like Aldo Leopold or Rachel Carson, who kept detailed nature journals. And we can then compare the data that they wrote down in their notebooks in 1850 and 1903 to what we're seeing today in those same locations. And that's where we can really get into some of that climate change science, seeing, for example, are there birds migrating at the same time? Are flowers coming out at the same time? So keeping that record provides information for yourself, but also for tons of other people. And I would also say that, as far as an end goal, it can be a great way to awaken interest in yourself that you didn't realize that you had by spending time and observing and thinking.
What a great answer. I love this idea of comparing it to past journals. We've actually had people talking about like lost whaling documents on our broadcast about that, and glacier programs. So photographers in like the early 1900s would go out and take a picture, and what they do now is get someone to go to that exact same spot, try and find the exact same perspective and take a picture, and you can really get a sense of how much glaciers have retreated in most cases, things like that, which is really, really neat. I love the ability to sort of connect the past to the present in such a meaningful way. Time flies and you're having fun, Danica. We got time for about a couple more questions. And so one of the first I wanted to highlight again was ethical collecting. So you brought this up as a sort of basic concept early on. Can you give an example of what unethical collecting might be like? So if a kid is going to leave this broadcast and go out, what shouldn't they do? What should they keep an eye on as they go out and look around in nature?
Yeah, really great question. And again, I would encourage you to look deeper into this on your own. I'll only have time to do sort of a few highlights, but you really want to think critically before you pick something up and remove it from an ecosystem of what is the role of that thing in the ecosystem, and is there anything depending on it? So for example, if you pick up one pine cone that's at the base of a huge Douglas fir and the ground is littered with hundreds of other pine cones, probably that's okay, because anything that needed to eat that pine cone, there's clearly lots of others around. If you come across a flower, a plant that only has one stalk and one beautiful flower on it, don't pick that one flower, because by taking away that one flower from that one plant, now the plant can't spread its nectar. Anything that was going to come by to eat food from it now will not have alternatives to that plant. So think about, how many of this object are there in the area, and how important is that thing to other organisms in the ecosystem?
What a fantastic answer. Here in Ontario, our provincial flower is the trillium. And this is something that I've barely ever seen in my life. And I know a lot of people really want trillium, so they actually had made it illegal to pick a trillium. You cannot go out and grab a trillium because it's so unique, so important to the ecosystem. And so, yeah, that was a very fitting example. It's true with history, too. There are shipwrecks all over the world. There are archaeological sites, and those things are really neat, and people want to own them. They want to hold them, but it's really important in a lot of cases to leave things where they are in nature and history and beyond. And it means that more people can appreciate it and that the ecosystem can stay intact. Very, very cool. Danica, what I want to do now is bring up again, you mentioned FraserRiverDiscovery.org. If people want to check out the website, check out your YouTube page. So much more to discover. This is just the tip of the iceberg. And of course, people can check you out on social media too at the FRDC. Not in all caps. You don't need to type it that way. That was a little crazy of me in the banner. I got ahead of myself. But thank you so much for joining us as part of this Week of Wonder. It's been such a thrill having you. And we inspired a lot of kids today to hopefully get outdoors. And I hope you guys at home all get to share your pictures of your own sit spots after this broadcast. Is there any last message you want to leave our audience with today, Danica? This has been so much fun.
Yeah, just if you're going to start a sit spot, the more you go, the more fun you'll have. And make sure to try new things while you're out there, so you never know what you never know.
Awesome. Danica, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.